Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the February 23rd, 2023 executive session of the Clarksville City Council. We have a presentation at the beginning of the Planning Commission report. Mr. Ed Holmes with the EHI Consulting, and Mr. Tyndall, he'll do the introduction. So you are recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, City Council. Today's kind of an exciting day for us at the Planning Commission because this is the first neighborhood plan we've completed in my tenure here, and honestly, in a long history of the Planning Commission, is not something we've really delved into. As you know, about a year and a half ago, we started to identify some issues in the Red River neighborhood. We did a small planning study with just planning staff and then decided to open it up for a bigger study. In a partnership with Neighborhood and Community Services through the Community Development Block Grant process, we hired EHI consultants, of which Mr. Holmes is the president of it. He's here tonight to present the initial Red River Neighborhood Plan presentation. You have the plan on your iPads. It's on the Planning Commission website. Planning Commission was presented this on Tuesday, and it will be brought for first reading next month to City Council. So if you have any questions between now and then, we're more than happy to answer them from the Planning Commission. And there may be a small tweak or two before you see it next, but we'll make sure we call those out next month. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Holmes, and he'll go through the presentation and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Tyndall. When you say next month, you're talking about April, not March.
The next executive session.
Okay. Mr. Holmes, welcome back.
Yes.
And you're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Ed Holmes, and I'm with EHI Consultants. We're a planning firm based in Louisville and Kentucky and also Lexington. We've got a brief presentation that we're going to go through to talk about the process of the Red River neighborhood and how we came with the recommendations that's incorporated into the plan. I also want to recognize Wanda Smith, the council person from that ward. She's been instrumental in getting this process moving, and we worked very closely with her. And without her input and assistance, we couldn't have got to this point. So that's something we wanted to note. And that the staff from Mr. Tyndall and Mr. Newburn have been absolutely excellent to work with. So I don't know how we're going to work the presentation. We have the clicker. Okay, to the right. There we go. I'm going to go through a lot of some of the formality of who we are and what we are and how we got to this point. We're a group of civil engineers and urban planners that have been doing this now for over 25, 26 years. A variety of our projects range from projects in North Carolina, Southeast Kentucky, and the southeastern region of the United States. And we're a small urban planning firm. And this is just a representative example of some of the projects we've done here. So, what is a plan and what's an area plan? With that, the area plan it focuses in on what are the strengths and weaknesses of a community. And we've looked at Red River to identify what are some of the strengths and the attributes that make it important enough to be worthy of delving into the planning process. So we had 2 outreach meetings with communities. One was in the fall, and then we had one late December to get the citizens' input into the process. And an issue or critical piece to this was the zoning component. I'm sure all of you know the concerns around zoning that was affecting Red River. So there are a variety of things that a zoning can and cannot do. A zoning guides land use decisions, and that's the primary thing that we're talking about. We're not getting into different types of development or what goes there, but we're talking about what controls or what describes your neighborhood, and that's zoning. The comprehensive plan, the city is undertaking that now, and that's a much bigger process, and we want to make sure that the Red River is incorporated into that planning process that's undergoing at this point. So the timing lined up pretty good for us with this plan, and then I'm sure we'll roll over into the Red River, into the comp plan. We did two visioning exercises, and these are some of the critical things we heard from residents, not only residents, but stakeholders we met with on Red River. Prioritize housing development for single-family homes over multifamily. We've heard that over and over again. We did a survey. Majority of the residents said we want single-family exclusively within Red River. Maintain and build more affordable housing. That's a critical piece of the community. Affordable housing is getting harder and harder to attain as we see rising costs in terms of home ownership and even rental. And improve housing maintenance and conditions. That's a function of code enforcement. And maximize opportunities or expand opportunities for home ownership. So those were some of the housing features that we heard from our meetings. Mobility, pedestrian safety, we heard that as a top concern of residents. Make it a walkable, sustainable community. Narrow roads create mobility issues and conflicts, so we need to really create a system of connectivity so people can move safely throughout the neighborhood. Need for sidewalks, curbs, and gutters. Public infrastructure are strong needs. And another area was open space and neighborhood aesthetics. Parks, a desire for green space within Red River was one that we heard quite a bit of. And improved neighborhood aesthetics from streetscapes, sidewalks, and those types of things that make the neighborhood a much better place to live. And then the zoning one was similar density to what the R2A. We heard a lot of discussion on what were the preferred zones, whether R2A, R3, or R6. So the preference was an R2A single family exclusive zone. This is just what we call a concept plan. If we could fully build Red River out with single family and focus on the edges of the community for your more higher density development. So that would be along the edges, you'll see multifamily or higher density, and the core Red River neighborhood should be exclusively single family. There was a study that was done by the RPC that talked about what are the concerns. They did a summary of the zoning. R3, the existing 3-family zoning with the current neighborhood is currently zoned. R2A, single family residential district, and then R6 district. And then there was a comp plan new zone that was also with the analysis. And I'll get into the analysis of our recommendations and findings, but this is what we currently had. And you see the makeups or the requirements within those zones. Our analysis looked at the 3 zones, R3, R2A, and R6. R3, there's a large number of non-conforming lots in the neighborhood, lots that didn't meet the zoning requirements within the R3 category. Single family and owner occupied units are conditional. They're not by right. They weren't permitted. They're not a approved part of the process. So single family and multifamily are permitted in that R3. It's an intensive use on the narrow lots that we currently saw in the neighborhood. So that was our analysis there. R2A, there's a significant number of large non-conforming lots in the community that didn't quite fit with what the lotting or the platting requirements were. It's the minimal increase in potential housing. It does provide some opportunities for increases in housing, but it was awkward to assemble or subdivide the high number of non-conforming lots we saw in the neighborhood. Then the R6 building permit envelope is a 25-foot lot width in the R6, and that was the most concerning problem we had with R6. If you got a 25-foot building envelope, 15-foot and then 10, they had 5 feet side yard requirements, that leaves you a 15-foot wide home, which is not the most best way to build a house. It makes a small, narrow lot. If the lots are wider, then you can accommodate something on it. But given the minimum lot size and the lot width, we thought that it was a very intensive use for that neighborhood and increased a higher density than what I think would be more applicable for that. And with that intensive use, you're putting more pressure on the narrow streets that are within the neighborhood, and it creates some parking requirements that would become awkward or unattainable. So our analysis looked at those, and then we give you just a quick concept of the minimum R2A is 5,000 square feet, R3 was 12,000, and R6 you can see 2,500 square feet, which really makes it a very small lot for R6. So we quickly start to rule out the R6 as a viable option for that neighborhood. So I'm gonna go through some of our recommendations of the plan and hit on why we decided what would be most appropriate. We heard the residents. They said single family was what they really wanted in the community, and we strive to address their needs because they're the residents that's living there and they're dealing with issues on a day-to-day basis. Single family exclusive zone is what they said they wanted, and so we wanted something that would be context sensitive or something that could be designed keeping the character of the community. The best model for this was to prioritize single family detached home developments within the community and the current standards between the R2A and the R6. We think you need to fall somewhere between that 25-foot width and the 40-foot width. And so it's somewhere in the 30-foot lot width. And that was based on, it wasn't just a number we averaged. Majority of the lots there are averaging about 30, 31 feet wide. For lots narrow than the recommended dimensions, it creates a high intense urban density that wasn't appropriate for this community. This gets to the crux of what we think would be most appropriate for Red River, and the zone, your land use map will guide your zoning decisions. And so what we were saying was, if you look at the yellow, that would be the single family exclusive residential district for R3. Then as you move out along the edges around Austin P and I think that's 8th Street, you could get more of increased density, meeting some of the urban demands of the community. And then to the north, you could go with a higher density. That brown would be more high density residential. So we meet some of the concerns of higher density, but we also protect the core of the neighborhood with single family. So our zoning recommendations was, and we didn't go into the details on the edge development, but this is what we were talking about. Push your higher density development along the edges there. And this just sort of shows how that could take place. From Lincoln Homes to Austin P, develop what they own, and then the College Street corridor. So if we're gonna do mixed use or higher density, it should be along the edges and not encroach upon the community. This is just some renderings we have done showing what that could potentially look like. But you could have a nice boulevard concept with trees, and it's walkable with wide sidewalks, and so you're marrying mobility with pedestrians and traffic as well. So our recommendation in terms of zoning was to establish a district that I said falls between that R2A and R6, but make sure it's a single family exclusive zone with dimensions that should fall between those two standards. Consider some siting provisions that would allow you to increase your side yards for driveways so that people wouldn't have to park in front of their house and along the sides would be preferred. And, if you could, and if you can consolidate lots, and, try and incorporate some easements for alleyway or rear access to your development, which then takes that pressure off the on-street parking. There we go. So that moves us over into housing. The issues that we saw in Red River go much further than just zoning. And until we address some of the other issues, it's going to be difficult, regardless of the zone, to return that neighborhood around. And one of the most important things is, how do we address the need for housing, stricter code enforcement, and infrastructure improvements? We think one way to do that, and we've done this in other communities, is create a community land trust. We think the CNCS would be a viable entity that could do that. And what a land trust does is they acquire the land, they hold the land in perpetuity. There's a 99-year lease with whoever owns the property, and they share in the equity if the owner moves on. It keeps the property long-term affordability, remains affordable for the next person that comes in and buys it. So we want to make sure we're addressing the needs of affordable housing and long-term affordability, so it doesn't, move on to a higher ownership rate. We also thought utilizing CNCS financial support programs would be an excellent way to really target this neighborhood for investment. They've got several programs that can be targeted. their community development block grant funds, first-time home buyers, housing rehabilitation program, and they got emergency repair programs. So we're thinking if we make a targeted emphasis and focus and combine that with the land trust, there would be some opportunities to move forward in some housing. Create a housing affordable trust fund. Communities are doing more of that because the dollars are shrinking. This would be a fund that would invest in the community. It would require a significant commitment from the community, the city, to do it on their part, but cities are committing dollars to affordable trust funds that you can then roll that money over as it comes back to you and target it for Red River. Strategic code enforcement. There's a significant amount of land in the area that's vacant, dilapidated, with numerous code violations. So what we're thinking was you really need to target some strategic code enforcement that can start to improve the neighborhood along, and that would be an easy fix just to move that forward in a short amount of time. This is one we call an employer-assisted housing program. Other communities, whether it's Austin P, hospitals, banks, or any employers in the community, could then commit to their employees that decide to move into Red River. You could provide either a down payment assistance. Some communities have done that, and employees that want to be close to town take advantage of it. So encourage or work with your employers to create some type of an employer-assisted housing program. It's a great opportunity, and I think would fit well within Red River. Infrastructure improvements. The Red River neighborhood, if you look at that map where the dark red is, and this was your own sidewalk study that was done, the red indicates that's the highest incidence of neighborhoods that don't have adequate sidewalks. So this just reinforces what is the obvious, that there needs to be some improvements in sidewalks, curbs, gutters, and infrastructure that came out of your study about a few years ago. And this was just our analysis of where we think sidewalks should go and improvements to enhance the walkability of that neighborhood. If anyone lives in a neighborhood, accessibility of how you can get to sidewalks is important, because this is an urban area. And as you want to move about, not only in Red River, but into the other areas, accessibility by sidewalks are important. So our infrastructure improvements, multi-use paths and trails, you're currently doing several of those now. And I think if you could connect Red River with that, not only is it healthy and walkable, but it also connects the community with the rest of broader part of Clarksville. So it's not just an isolated community that's difficult to get to. And future trail connectivities, we're saying connected to Edith Pettis Parks, and tied into other parts of Red River. So then they also have an opportunity to walk, bike, or exercise along the trail. And then it also ties back into Red River being a functioning part of the city. Infrastructure and open space, I think we've touched on that. Streetscape, transit, those types of things need to be improved within Red River as well. Improve the overall character and functionality of the neighborhood. And we talked about, outdoor community spaces. People tend to gather outdoors, and they prefer to do that when the weather's nice. So why not create activities outside that would be a part of Red River? And then this is an implementation schedule where we assign costs and what we just roughly estimate who the partners would be. 90% of that's the city, RPC, and other agencies within the city. Timeline, some are short-term, some are long-term. One of our immediate short-term recommendations was that the Planning Commission immediately after adoption undertake the recommendation of improving that single-family only zone. And I think Mr. Tyndall and the Planning Commission would be prepared to do that. And I think we put a time frame of immediate or 8 months or less to get that done, because it is urgent, because the Red River is getting development pressures from multifamily, duplexes, and other types of multifamily that's starting to take away from the character of this, this historic neighborhood. This historic neighborhood is significant and more so than just housing, but the history of what we could ascertain from Red River. If we're going to preserve the character and the function of it, we really need to undertake this as soon as possible. Then the other implementations, the land trusts, would take some time and a commitment of dollars, all the way up to infrastructure, sidewalks, curbs, gutters, roadway improvement. Those are pretty hefty price tags, but it's an investment that I think will return in itself. One timeline that we put in terms of housing was, you've got about 90 vacant lots or more, 90 to 100 vacant lots in the community. If we could have a strategy built around housing and infrastructure of 10 lots a year, convert that to single family, then in a 10-year time frame, you'll see a significant turnaround in Red River. And that just goes through the remainder of the recommendations. The next steps then is identify your funding and implementation mechanisms that we've talked about. We did a draft document in 22. Then now we're in February, we're trying to finalize the plan for final adoption with some final tweaks and changes. And that concludes my presentation. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Your name was called, Councilperson Smith, and you were the catalyst behind this plan. So I'll recognize you first.
Thank you, Mayor. What can I say? After such a powerful presentation about revitalizing Ward 6, I think that all that needs to be said is thank you for your thorough analysis, for your work you have done in collaboration. You work inclusively with Neighborhood, Community, and Housing, Mr. Newbern. You work with Mr. Tyndall one-on-one, inclusively, and their staff. Don't want to forget the staff because they're part of it. You worked with me, as I told you, don't mention me.
Hard
I'm
not to.
nobody. I'm just here to try to do my job. But thank you, and we want to most of all thank the city for providing the fund and Mr. Tyndall's office, Planning Commission. They work together. That's what I say, teamwork makes the dream work. And I also want to thank the council for allowing us to do this survey and to be attentive to what has been said on tonight from Mr. Edward Holmes and his staff. You have brought clarity to a community that was dying, and it's still dying. But you painted a beautiful picture of art. And we said, thank you. We now have recommendations as to what we ought to do. You have given us steps as to how to follow this. You have given us advice. You have done a thorough analysis, I would say that, because your work has been exceptional.
Thank you.
Exceptional performances. And I want to thank you on behalf of this community, Ward 6, over in my low-income neighborhood. We want to thank you for providing them the opportunity to be a part, to give feedback, and to take the survey. You didn't have to do this, but you did it. When we hired you, you said what you was going to do, and you did it. And we appreciate it. I even asked you would you follow along with us after we have adopted the plan, and you said, sure. Anytime you need me to call me, you said you don't have to pay me. That's what I call a organization, or I would say a firm, that is sincere about fulfilling the needs of a dying community. And I appreciate that. And most of all, I want to thank the mayor, last but not least, who saw fit that all communities are not created equal. And he done something about it. He heard the cries of the people, and that's I always say that, because if it was not for the people, we wouldn't be getting paid today. The people in this city makes the world go round in this sense. And I want to thank Mayor Pitts for what you have done, Mayor. You stood the test of time, and you always trying to be the change. You have been the change. And I definitely want to thank Mr. Tyndall again, and Mr. Newbern, and Mr. Edwards, and your staff. You have been just outstanding. And thank you for presenting on tonight.
Thank you.
God bless.
Thank you. We got time for just a couple of more questions. Councilperson Reynolds, you're recognized.
Yes, I won't be as eloquent. I, I'm really excited. I've already sent my notes to RPC about like when are we going to see the zone changes? Like what can I do to help you? So this is really exciting. I really appreciated when you talked about how we've been talking about this since 1976, and your findings were similar to the findings since 1976, and to the council, if we work together and get this done right, we have so many other neighborhoods that this type of development will fit. I mean, I drove around some of the zonings this afternoon, and I saw one right off the bat that I hope I'm already on the list at RPC to do after this one. So I appreciate it, and I appreciate the hard work, and I hope to be talk about this at every single meeting. Like I want to see something new to support this at every meeting from now on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilperson Smith, you're
Mayor, I
recognized.
forgot to tell Mr. Edwards that I learned a lot. And Mr. Tindall and I was talking about you, and he said, I've learned a lot. And, we're going to use this for future rezoning. And if I'm not telling the truth, I want Mr. Tindall to stand up and say you lying. But we learned a lot. We learned a lot. And thank you. And Mayor, I would like for Mr. Newbern to come up, please.
Mr. Newbern, your name was called. Invite you up.
Hello, Mr. Newbern. We can't thank you enough. You've been a head leader in this project. You and your staff. It's Deborah back there as well. Can you tell us a little bit about the land trust? Do we have one? What's going on with that? And then how are we going to get the money to do this? And then I got 3 questions. And how long you think it'll take us to begin this process?
I was hoping you'd do the praise thing with me too. So.
Pull the mic closer so we can hear you sing.
I did.
So the first question that you asked, the CLT, or Community Land Trust, as Mr. Holmes has talked about, there's not one in Clarksville that I'm aware, but there's a lot of benefits associated with it in terms of the fact that it's generally considered to be a tri-party organization between city government, county government, and the private sector or residents of the neighborhood to do affordable housing, to do economic development as well. And so the very idea of all three parties getting together to do a project like this, I think would be a tremendous benefit for the community. So I was actually very excited to hear about that recommendation. In regards to money, all of these activities that he has spoken about tonight are eligible under the Community Development Block Grant Fund. And as we go forward in our conversations with the mayor about possible uses for upcoming funding, I'm certain that this will be at the top of the list. So in consultation with the community, with the mayor, and of course yourself, I'm hopeful that we will be able to identify and budget for some activities that will address the things that are listed in the plan.
And then how long you think that this process would take to begin? What should we do? And
I'm hoping that we can begin at least the creation of the land trust in very short order, gathering the people in consultation with yourself and other residents of the community to determine interest, to have an explanation or create an understanding of what a land trust is, and to begin the legal infrastructure that would be necessary to make it happen. I see that happening within the next 90 days.
okay, thank you, Mr. Newman, and thank you for all of your help, head leader. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Holmes, to you and your firm for providing us an excellent blueprint to protect this legacy neighborhood. Okay, we're now ready for the next item on our Planning Commission report, Ordinance 82. Item 2, Ordinance 82. Mr. Tindall?
All right. And now the fun stuff. A couple cases before you tonight. First one tonight is Planning Commission case Z6 2023, application of Jonathan Blick. This is 0.25 acres, currently zoned R3 and requesting to go to R6. The parcel fronts Roman Street, approximately 180 feet east of the southern intersection of Roman and Ford Streets, Council Ward number 6. This area may look familiar. We've just talked about this neighborhood. The applicant's statement is to provide 2 single-family homes, total square feet of each home around 1,000 to 1,200 square feet, and around the $200,000 price range. As you can see, as we just mentioned, everything in R4 to the west is the Lincoln Homes properties, and then R3 is the majority of this neighborhood here, except for the one R6 rezoning about a year ago, just south of here. I will make mention that the Planning Commission recommended the applicant defer last month, and he was amenable to that so that we could get the study more wrapped up and look at what the guidance was from the study to look at this site. Your current land use plan for this area indicates only multifamily. You have a plan in front of you that is not quite adopted yet, has been presented, should be adopted next month by the Planning Commission and hopefully adopted here at first reading. The recommendations in there do support this, and I'll get to that in a little bit later, but you do have additional information that is coming your way to potentially support this if you like. Here's the property. It's recently been cleared on the left there where our sign is. And I believe it was a wooded lot to begin with. They did not take any houses down. Here's 2 other houses in the neighborhood just next to it. And one more recent construction right across the street. Water system upgrades will be needed for this. Sidewalks are required per the R6 standards, and you see the school system comments about their capacities listed. Historical estimates would be just 2 units, or 2 lots, 2 houses. Staff does recommend approval. The proposed zoning request is consistent with the land use plan and would be consistent with the Red River neighborhood plan for the Roman Street area. This property falls within the Red River neighborhood. The recently completed study identifies that this area is located in an appropriate area for a higher density single-family development. Adequate infrastructure serves the site once that water upgrade is done, and other supportive uses such as mass transit and retail are in the area, and it is in close proximity to downtown and Austin P. No adverse environmental issues identified, and sidewalks will be required. Planning Commission did also recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Tyndall. Councilperson McLaughlin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. The picture that you popped up across the street, is that an R6 or?
No, that is a existing R3 lot that was only big enough to build a single family on it.
Okay, and then with this proposed zone change, how many single-family homes can go on it?
As currently it stands, you could build a duplex on the R3 property. They're going to build 2 single family houses. So
Okay,
really you're just trading a duplex for 2 individual lots.
okay, thank you.
Councilperson Reynolds, you're recognized.
Yes, Mr. Chino. So my question, so I read the proposal, but according to, they're not gonna they're gonna go try to get away from R6 in the community, right? Overall, overarching, that's the recommendation, not to build R6 in the community.
As sort of a little give and take, and as we were developing that plan with the community, we said the edges are more appropriate for higher density, whether that's triplexes, duplexes, quadplexes, more toward Austin P or toward College Street. This Roman Street, as we identified late in the process, is kind of stands alone and is really very closely tied to the Lincoln Homes, which is a high density area. Most of those lots would accommodate a duplex as it is right now under the current R3. So we felt that if we were to open an area, for instance, for R6, the Roman Street loop would be one that would be appropriate. No through traffic, smaller lots that you're not really going to increase the density over what's currently allowed there. So a little give and take. And I do thank the councilwoman from the area who supported that. And we had some discussion on this area, but I think she understands what's going on in there. And the R6, for instance, would be more targeted to just certain roads and not kind of spread throughout and having you judge every month. As we bring back the zoning change to you pretty quickly, I hope, after we adopt it at the Planning Commission, we will initiate the change for this neighborhood and bring it back quicker than if we had to go back and forth with getting a resolution to do it after second reading. I think you'll see an area that we preserve that core for single family only. R6 may be more appropriate toward the corners as it gets rezoned, but
The
see
only
it
reason I have concern for that is I drove it and I may have gotten a little lost back there. But it seems like I had to weave through the neighborhood, and when I listened to you, you know, we don't want the high density in the back, and that seems like kind of just on this particular road that's what we're doing, because this is the back, and I did have to weave through. There might have been a better way, I just didn't know it. That's my concern, and are we going to improve the roads then for that area to get back there?
This this neighborhood is 1 block away from 8th Street, which dumps out on Craft Street, which is
Okay,
why
I
we
didn't
felt
get
the
there on
higher
my own.
density was appropriate. And the bus actually does go down to Ferris Street back there too. So
Okay.
fairly close to all those. You probably came off College Street, and yeah, it does seem like it's. a
Yeah,
little further
I didn't get there on my own. Okay.
back. Okay.
Councilperson Streetman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to kind of just confirm based what you were saying. If everybody would take a look at the presentation with the map that was included and kind of do a little overlay, you'll see that that exact area was part of the area that was recommended for more high density development right in there. Whereas like you said, the core would be smaller. But that part right there, if you'll just do a overlay, you'll see that. And as was stated, you know, it was considered that the R6 was what was looked at as more your high density, which would give you a mix back there as well. So, thank you.
Councilperson Smith, you're recognized.
Hello, Ms. Tyndall. If it stayed R3, how many houses could they build?
Right now for this lot,
I'm
one.
not talking about duplexes, I'm talking about houses. Can they still
Well,
build
and I
two?
think that's part of the issue is it can only be a duplex, and that's why the zoning in this area needs some changes.
Why it has to only be a duplex when R3 allows single-family homes?
It does on a lot of record, but I believe given the opportunity for a duplex, and the developer's going to take an opportunity to build a duplex. You could build a single-family house since it is existing prior to
Because the house
2010.
next to it now, the house that you showed us, the blue, if you want to go
Right.
back, can you go back to that? That's a pretty good
yes.
sized house. I'm over there all the time. My
Mhm.
girlfriend lived right behind there, that house behind it. And I've been over there. So that's a nice sized house. Now that's R3.
Correct.
So why does that have to be R6? When he can do the
Let
same
me-
thing.
Okay, this might help explain it a little
And see,
bit.
and are you gonna add sidewalks? Because you know, all the houses that has been built over there recently have not added any sidewalks. And we know that is a requirement. But
R6
it has not
requirement.
happened for that neighborhood.
The R6 would require it in front of the properties, so the 50 feet in front of their properties there.
But that home that
So
we're
let's look
building now-
across the street. It's so new that it didn't even show up on the aerial here. But see the depth of that lot? That is a much smaller lot. It can only accommodate
Width-wise.
depth-wise. It's the same
Depth,
width,
okay.
but the depth drops it below that required 10,000 square feet for a duplex.
You're talking about from here to here,
Yes.
okay?
But across the street, see how that's not as deep across the street. So it doesn't have the same square footage. It doesn't meet that minimum needed for the duplex.
So it don't meet the minimum for the duplex.
So you can only do a single family house. This property on the other hand has the amount of square foot for a duplex.
What is the square footage on the other
About
house?
0.2 acres. So this is 0.25 acres, so a couple hundred square feet more than the minimum.
Were there any complaints from the citizens?
We did not receive any
Were they notified?
feedback. Of course they were.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tyndall. We're now ready for item 3, ordinance 83.
All right. This is the application Z9 2023 from the Planning Commission, application of Fernando Ramos, 0.24 acres of R3 requesting to go to R6, not an extension of the zoning classification. The parcel is on the frontage of Daniel Street, 120 feet west of Daniel and Central Avenue intersection in City Council Ward Number 6. It's currently a single-family home site with a residence on site, and the applicant's statement is to improve the property and update the property. This is actually right across the street from the recent announcement of the, I believe it's called the Burnham Park, that the county is going to be putting, and you'll see some of the sites, or the site on the pictures here. This blue house in the middle is the one that would be taken down. Again, per the regulations, the width and the depth and the lot size, this could be a duplex under R3. And they're just didn't ask for the 2 single-family houses. This is looking from the church parking lot. And again, this right in front of that car there is the house in question. There's the park that the county is going to improve across the street. Staff comments, possible water main upgrades will be needed. Sidewalks are required per R6. There was a drainage comment. Any modification of the catch basin will be at the cost of the developer. And the school system comments on their capacities listed. Again, historical estimates would only be 2 lots. Staff recommends approval. The proposed request is consistent with the land use plan. The proposed R6 residential zone is not out of character with the surrounding development pattern. Adequate infrastructure serves the site, including other residential uses such as mass transit, retail in the area, and no adverse environmental issues were identified relative to this request. Planning Commission also recommended approval.
Thank you, Mr. Tyndall. See no comment or question requested, so we're now ready for item 4, ordinance 84. Mr. Tyndall, please, sir.
This is Planning Commission case Z10, 2023. Gyansham and Shanjikra Patel. This is 0.49 acres of C1 requesting to go to C2. And it is an extension of the C2 classification. This is adjacent to the gas station on the corner of Greenwood and Crossland Avenue. The parcel, City Council Ward number 6. It's a relatively level parcel with a residential structure currently on site. The applicant's statement is, we request to extend the adjacent C2 from the west for the opportunity of mixed-use commercial. There's the structure on the property right now, the fences between the gas station and this property. They do own the gas station property adjacent to it. And these are some shots of some recently improved houses across the street. There were no comments or concerns from the other departments. The school system did provide the capacities listed if this does become multifamily. Our historical estimates would put this at 6 units. It's important to note, and the developer did talk at the Planning Commission about their intentions. They intend to just develop this property as multifamily, but because they own both, they can combine them into one parcel. Thus, the density could be higher, up to 12 units on the property. However, when you start talking about parking and other spaces around a building, it'll be hard for them to do 12 units. So they intend to do 6 or 7 units on just this parcel adjacent to their other parcel that they own. Staff does recommend approval. The proposed request is consistent with the land use plan. The request is an extension of the C2 zoning to the west. C2 zoning permits the opportunity for goods and services with the additional opportunity for mixed-use residential. And adequate infrastructure serves the site and no adverse environmental issues were identified. The Planning Commission also recommended approval.
Thank you, Mr. Tyndall. Councilperson Reynolds, you're recognized.
Yes, Mr. Tyndall, thank you for bringing up the conversation at the meeting. I have a concern that they're utilizing the C2 when it really should be R4. Like if you're gonna only build our apartments, then then there should be a transparency to our residents of what we're gonna build there. We don't get to control. Once we pass it, we don't get to say what you're going to do. So I was wondering at what point can we strengthen, so there's a divide. So either you build a mixed use with the C2 or you get an R4. I mean, it's because a lot of people get excited about a C2, but they really don't want just apartments, but they'll take the apartments if they come with the businesses. And that's a perfect area actually for a mixed use. And a good opportunity that obviously by the builder isn't going to be exercised. So how do we do that? How do we fix that?
That's a planning theory class in and of itself right there. There's a lot of ways we can go about that. I think when C2 was amended in 2010 to allow the multifamily, they simply took R4, C2, put them together. For instance, we also allow car washes next to apartment buildings, and I don't think that's necessarily an appropriate thing either. So there's some things in the C2 that could be cleaned up. As we're working through our comprehensive plan process, and I know I've mentioned this a bit, we're going to promote more mixed use, especially along our corridors. This zone is going to be important, but it will need to be tweaked to promote more mixed use, whereas right now it's kind of become just an either or. We've seen C2 be offices, we've seen C2 become townhouses. I can probably count on 2 fingers the amount of mixed use projects we've had in the last year on the C2 parcel.
So I would like to say a quick fix is to say you have to have 2 businesses or 1 business one commercial per, I don't know, half an acre or whatever. You know, like make a minimum standard, and if you're not going to do that, then do the R4. It's just, I just don't think that it's transparent sometimes.
And personally, this is discussions we've had with staff. One of the other things would be you could potentially limit the density so it isn't as desirable as R4. Therefore, you may want to use it R4 to get additional density. So you can either bump the density of R4 while lowering C2, or just lower C2 to 10 or 12 units an acre. Then it makes it more viable to go to R4 for that purpose. Typically, you see a quadplex per quarter acre or 16 units an acre. So there's a couple ways we can do that. That's a discussion we'll have to have with the code department to make sure everyone's on board with what's the most appropriate way to tackle it. But it would have ripple effects through the community. And as you know, that's something I'm always hesitant to make a change for one neighborhood that's going to change something throughout the city.
I just think if you're going to do C2, put some business, because I'm like you, I appreciate the mixed use. I'm not opposed to mixed use. I'm just opposed when they have the opportunity that they hide behind it and then just do R4. Mm-hmm. So I would just like to close that loop. That's all. Not really make changes, just make it more transparent and close the loop.
I think some of my commissioners would agree with you.
Thank you.
Councilperson Streetman, you recognize.
Thank you. I do have a question. What's the minimum size lot for R4?
Quarter acre.
It's just a quarter?
Yes.
Okay. I was thinking it was half. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. We're now ready for item 5, ordinance 85. Mr. Tyndall, please, sir.
This is application Z11 2023, application of Marciela Ramos, 1.94 acres, currently zoned R4 and requesting to go to R6. Not an extension of the R6. This tract fronts the west frontage of Cedar Court, 250 feet north of the southern terminus of Cedar Court in Council Ward number 4. It's a large tract with moderate topography and a single family structure on site, and the applicant's statement is to improve and better utilize the property. And here you can see the zoning in the area. The R4 to the west of this property is a mobile home park, and we've seen some development in this area recently with some R6 and some additional R4 as well. This is the property. That's the home that's on site. They've indicated they're going to try to save the home and build around it. Some other pictures of the area across the street. Another one of across the street. And one of the homes right across the street. The only comments or concerns from other departments was the need for sidewalk required per R4 and the school system capacities listed. Historical estimates, if they don't protect the home, would be 10 units. Obviously less if they keep the existing home on there due to the setbacks. Staff recommends approval. The proposed request is consistent with the land use plan. The proposed R6 single-family development is not out of character with the development pattern. Adequate infrastructure serves the site, including other residential uses such as mass transit and retail in the area, and no adverse environmental issues were identified relative to this request. Planning Commission also recommended approval.
Thank you, Mr. Tyndall. Councilperson Reynolds, you're recognized.
Okay, just to make sure, this is the one I didn't drive today. This is very close to the Vulcan, to the site, right? To the quarry? No.
Up New Providence. This one's a lot closer to Rural King.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay. Item number 6, ordinance 86. The applicant has notified the clerk that they are withdrawing that application, so we will not be discussing that one. So we're now ready for item 7, ordinance 87. Mr. Tyndall.
This is application Z13 2023. And just for transparency, the previous application was Z12 at the Planning Commission, and they've requested withdrawal after the Planning Commission meeting. So this one up, Z13 2023. Application of Ava Homes. This is 0.52 acres of R3 and requesting to go to R6. This is not an extension of the zoning classification. This is on the southwest corner of Mitchell and Market Street in Council Ward number 4. It's a corner lot with a residential structure on site. And the applicant statement is redevelopment of an underutilized parcel in an area experiencing transition and improvement into multiple single-family lots. There's the home on the site right now at the corner. And a view of the house to the right, looking back at the street, across the street. Sidewalks will be required on both Mitchell and Market Street per the R6 provisions. No other comments were listed, and the school system comments on their capacities also there. Under the current R3, you could put a triplex on this property because it is a half acre. Historical estimates, though, for R6 would put this at 6 units. Staff does recommend approval. The proposed request is consistent with the land use plan. The R6 single-family zoning is not out of character with the zoning surrounding development pattern. Adequate infrastructure serves the site and no adverse environmental issues were identified, and the Planning Commission also recommended approval. This might be the one near the quarry you were speaking of.
Thank you, Mr. Tyndall. Before we move to the last item on the list, I saw some puzzled looks and faces out in the audience regarding item number 6, Ordinance 86. Can you explain, since the applicant has withdrawn that, what
Yes.
options do they have about bringing it back if they choose to do that?
So when an application gets withdrawn, whether that's at the Planning Commission, at the City Council level, or it's denied, the applicant cannot reapply to the Planning Commission from a year from when they originally applied, which is approximately 30 to 40 days ago. They can apply if the City Council passes a resolution to lift that, but that would be on any future agenda of the City Council if they decided to ask for that to be done.
Okay.
So in essence, it's once it's withdrawn, it'll stay as it is for the time being.
Okay, thank you, sir. We're now ready for item 8, Ordinance 88. Mr. Tyndall, please, sir.
This is Planning Commission. Okay, I'm sorry. We had another deferral. This is Planning Commission case Z15 2023. The applicants are Michael Schrecker and Donald Washington, and the agent is Alex Zedoff of HBG Holdings LLC. This is 76.85 acres, currently zoned R1 and requesting to go to R2. It is an extension of the R2 in the area. This is 4 tracts of land located at the eastern terminus of Fox Ridge Drive and Granger Lane, north of Pollard Road. This is in Council Ward number 4. This tract includes a single-family home and has some varying topography, mostly wooded. The applicant's statement is the property is to be subdivided for a single-family residential cluster subdivision. The subdivision is the subdivisions to the west and southwest of the site are currently R2, and the property to the north is zoned R2. This is the property. This is on Pollard Road. The property there to the left, that is the home that I hope I'm saying this right. I believe that was part of the purchase, and this would become one of the main entrances to the subdivision off of Pollard Road. The other entrances would come off those other 2 stub roads that I mentioned, and I'll show you those in a second. And actually maybe coming in next to that house. Again, we haven't seen a final subdivision on it because we're just zoning it today. Pollard Road looking in the opposite direction. You're back in the approximate area where the road would come out. And looking in the other direction. This is one of the 2 stub roads I mentioned, Fox Ridge Drive and Granger Lane. The end of there, that's wooded. That would continue on with the future road there. And again, with the other road continuing on. Let's see. Street Department comments. They want the applicant to confirm the existence of the Blue Line stream, which they will in conjunction with the subdivision development on there, and respect those buffers. A traffic assessment was received. They cannot connect to the northeast frontage of the property, but they did also not require any additional roadway improvements at this time. We also requested the park system comments, and I think she said they'll hold their comments till the subdivision comes in, but there is an opportunity to tie this subdivision in with additional greenway access to the neighborhood. You can also see the comments of the capacities listed for the school system. Historical estimates with the R2 cluster would be 215 units. Staff does recommend approval. The proposed request is consistent with the land use plan. The R2 single-family zoning classification is not out of character with the surrounding development pattern. The property is adjacent to the Clarksville Greenway, and the RPC will work with Parks and Rec Department and the developer to coordinate appropriate connections from the proposed development to the Greenway. Adequate infrastructure serves the site and no adverse environmental issues were identified, and the Planning Commission also recommended approval.
Thank you, Mr. Tyndall. Councilperson Reynolds, you're recognized.
Yes. I guess I'm the only one. So I actually drove this today and really took my time, went through it. And this is like me sounding like a broken record. I'm not opposed to infill, but Pollard Lane is narrow, and you're gonna, if anything happens, again, we're putting our density in the back, and as we get more rooftops, we're gonna create too many rooftops with not enough entrances and exits out, and the road is still just a narrow 2-lane road with no shoulder and no sidewalks. If we're going to infill, this is what I continue to say, we need to be pro people and put in sidewalks and widen the road as we go. We cannot any longer wait for it to happen because they're already there. They're not coming. We're adding to the mess. And so people think that I'm against this. I'm really not, but I don't think that it's fair to the community that's been there for years to put any more houses back there until we widen and put a sidewalk along Pollard. We've already added a great deal of traffic just by putting the greenway back there. And there's a potential for so many more houses back there. There's a lot of R2 back there to be developed. And it's a beautiful area, and I can see the potential. But we owe it to our community at this point as we infill to put in the roads first. So I will be voting against this, but again, because I think as a city, we owe it to the residents to fix that road before we add more houses.
Councilperson McLaughlin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. So there's some history with this, and I'm just going to bring up my biggest concern is the house that you showed that's on the triangle lot. The line seems to cut across his driveway, and this has come up, I would say, probably 12 years ago when I was here before. First of all, do you have any idea where they might access Pollard Road, and how close will it be to the houses on either side of where that triangle-shaped lot is?
Okay.
That house.
Yes.
Yep.
And there we go. That's the best I can do. And you can look on your tablets as well. That house lies. That house will be acquired as per this zoning recommendation right here. So the house I showed you, there's a house to the right, which I didn't show in the pictures, a little further down, probably about 250 feet down the road. That parcel is the one that you talked about, has an encroachment on one of Mr. Schrecker's parcels. Correct. And in our view, that's a private encroachment that doesn't affect the zoning, and that's something Mr. Schrecker and that property owner will need to work out. But someone has had a driveway there with or without permission, and to me, that's a private issue. Yes. But the entryway is not going to come exactly next to that house. It will likely come a little further out where it's better suited at the curve there.
Okay, well, I'm just preparing you for the discussions that'll come from that resident there on that triangle, because
He's called us a bunch, yes.
yeah, and he does have a valid concern, and there were issues in the past that weren't necessarily zoning related, but between the property owner and the existing house there, and I just want to make sure that in this case, well, in all cases really, that we need to take into consideration people that already have infrastructure somewhere that they've invested in, and then all of a sudden now somebody's going to have a road or potentially a property built right in his existing driveway. That's my concern, and I know that has nothing to do with the actual zone change, because at R1 that could still happen once it's developed, but I just want us to really be responsible when it comes to that existing house that's been there since the late 60s, early 70s, and if that makes sense. I know that we can't conditional zone, I'm not saying that, but I'm just asking the staff to please do what you can to try to work through that, and maybe work with the potential developer on, although they haven't gotten along in the past, but.
I know the developer will be here next week and their
Okay.
engineer. I think that's a great question for them.
I will,
But
I will
and
try
he's
to speak to
seemed
them.
reasonable to work with us thus far. But I will say, when we get to subdivision phase, that's an opportunity where he may just deed that over and just be done with it and just fix it all for everybody. But
That would be
again, I think that's a
amazing.
great question next week for you to
If
ask
you would
them.
introduce me to the
Sure, I can
developer,
get you
then
the
I
contact
would
information.
be glad to have that conversation.
Sure.
Thank you.
Councilperson Shekinah, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Tyndall, I have one question for clarity for my part. I looked at the street department comments and it states that no road requirements are identified at this time. Could there be some road requirements identified at a later time and then the developer would have to pay for that?
I'd have to, Mayor, I'm going to want to defer that question to the street department. Mr. Shekinah asked if there could be improvements at a later time on the development than what the current traffic study said. But I'd want to let them answer that question.
Councilperson Shekinah, you want me to call up?
Yes, please.
Please, Mr. Cowan, if you don't mind. And when he gets here, if you don't mind asking your question
Yes,
again, so he
yes.
has it in front of him.
Thank you. Mr. Cowan,
Yes, sir.
I see the street department comments and it states that there are no identified requirements for road improvements at this time. Could there be some identified requirements for road improvements at a later time? And if so, would that be upon the developer if they're identified?
Yes, after this, if this were to pass through zoning and they would, their next step would be to come with a subdivision plan perhaps. We would get an opportunity to review at that time, once we have more specific information about roadway access points that they're proposing. We would do a thorough review of that. We can ask for additional traffic study at that time that would be more specific, that could identify those improvements. And we can require those, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Cowan. Councilperson Smith, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. Just looking at this ordinance from R2 to R1, why would they decide to go from R2 to R1? Why?
R1 to R2.
I mean, from R1 to R2, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In the end, I'll tell you the answer to that. From R1 to R2, they gain about 60 units.
Oh,
You can
60
still
units.
cluster R1, but R2 is a slightly bigger yield, so they gain 60 units.
60 units.
Which makes it viable to.
And so how many ingress and egress would we have? Would it just be on Pollard Road?
No, you're gonna have one off Pollard Road, and then you see the two roads to the west that go into it, the two sideways.
On this side?
Yep. Those two roads that come in would also connect through to the subdivision.
In and out, okay.
So you'll basically have three main entrances to the
And they
subdivision.
want 215 units?
That's our estimate. It is a tough piece of property that
It
can
is.
fluctuate.
It is gonna cause a lot of traffic congestion on Pollard Road, and you do know that it is very narrow. And when it snows out there, I know my daughter lives on Pollard Road, you slide. It's dangerous. Have you had any, opposition from any of the citizens?
We did have some opposition up here. We don't have any opposition to share in terms of emails, but we did have several folks speak at the
Several.
planning commission.
Okay. All right then, thank you so much.
Councilperson Streetman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. I know you mentioned they could cluster it as R1, but they can cluster it as R2
Yes.
as well, correct? And that's where the 215, it's the same whether they do cluster or not, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilperson Reynolds, you're recognized.
Yes, so back to my concern, like right now, we're just talking about this one piece, but if you look at the map, there's quite a bit of R2 behind it. Is Pollard Lane on the map to be widened and get a sidewalk in the next years to come? Is that even, I mean, I don't see that we can keep adding rooftops without a long-range plan for this road. It's,
I'll answer that. The answer is no.
okay, thank you.
Councilperson Allen, you're recognized.
So, I want to go back and piggyback off the last, previous council member. I see where the roads are coming out of the property. You're talking about Granger Lane and
Fox
Fox
Ridge.
Moore,
Fox Ridge Drive.
Fox Ridge.
Yes. Which goes off of Fox Moore.
Okay, but still all roads end at Pollard Road.
The majority of Pollard Road, or majority of subdivisions off Pollard Road, go back to Pollard Road. It pinches down right around this intersection, and then it branches back out to about 4 or 5 different roads that go out to Peters Mill Road. You see the Dominion Drive right next there?
I see Dominion.
Yeah, and then there's R2 to the north there that eventually goes to the back near the Pine Mountain Road or the Kenwood system. That road has the potential, if it's ever developed, to go out, and that would also help this area tremendously to get out to both the park and to the Kenwood system. But that property is not, it's been R2 for a long time. The property to the northeast is city-owned property around the Greenway.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I see no one else wishing to ask questions about this one. Mr. Tyndall,
I think that's all.
that completes it. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. We're now ready for the consent agenda. Madam Clerk, please read the consent agenda.
All items in this portion of the agenda are considered to be routine and non-controversial by the council and may be approved by one motion. However, a member of the council may request that an item be removed for separate consideration under the appropriate committee report. Ordinance 121-21-22, second reading, postponed on 7/7/22. An ordinance submitting to the qualified voters of the city of Clarksville the question of whether the city shall adopt home rule. Ordinance 67-2022-2023, second reading, an ordinance of the city of Clarksville authorizing the mayor or his designee to conduct negotiations and to enter an agreement for purchase and acquisition of easements and or property rights for a public purpose for the Hazelwood Pisgah School Sidewalk Project. Ordinance 68-2022-23, second reading, an ordinance of the city of Clarksville authorizing the mayor or his designee to conduct negotiations and to enter an agreement for purchase and acquisition of easements and or property rights for public use purpose for the Meriwether Connection School Sidewalk Project. Ordinance 69-2022-23, second reading, an ordinance of the city of Clarksville authorizing the mayor or his designee to conduct negotiations and to enter an agreement for purchase and acquisition of easements and or property rights for public purpose for the Rossview Elementary Connection School Sidewalk Project. Ordinance 70-2022-23, second reading, an ordinance of the city of Clarksville authorizing the mayor or his designee to conduct negotiations and to enter an agreement for purchase and acquisition of easements and or property rights for a public purpose for the Northeast Connection School Sidewalk Project. Ordinance 71-2022-23, second reading, an ordinance of the city of Clarksville authorizing the mayor or his designee to conduct negotiations and to enter an agreement for purchase and acquisition of easements and or property rights for a public purpose for the Peaches Mill School Sidewalk Project. Ordinance 73-2022-23, second reading, amending the zoning ordinance and map of the city of Clarksville, application of DJ Development, LLC, agent Stanley Ross, for zone change on property located at the intersection of Madison Street and Village Way from C5 Highway and Arterial Commercial District to R4 Multiple Family Residential District. Ordinance 74-2022-23, second reading, amending the zoning ordinance and map of the city of Clarksville, application of Chris Blackwell, construction for zone change on property located at the intersection of Crossland Avenue and Martin Street from R3 3-family residential district to R6 single-family residential district. Ordinance 75-2022-23, second reading, amending the zoning ordinance and map of the city of Clarksville, application of Concord Ventures Group, LLC, Richard Garrett, agent, for zone change on property located at the intersection of Oak Street and B Street from R3 3-family residential district to R4 multiple family residential district. Ordinance 76-2022-23, second reading, amending the zoning ordinance and map of the city of Clarksville, application of Rick Rita Homes, LLC, for zone change on property located east of Fort Campbell Boulevard and north of Idlewood Street from R1 Single Family Residential District to C2 General Commercial District. Ordinance 77-2022-23, second reading, amending the zoning ordinance and map of the city of Clarksville, application of Jonathan Blick for zone change on property located at the intersection of Liberty Parkway and Delmar Drive from R2 Single Family Residential District to C2 General Commercial District. Ordinance 78, 2022-23, second reading, amending the zoning ordinance and map of the city of Clarksville, application of C. Wilson for zone change on property located at the intersection of P. Ridge Road and Sandbar Drive from R1 Single Family Residential District to C5 Highway and Arterial Commercial District. Ordinance 79, 2022-23, second reading, amending the zoning ordinance and map of the city of Clarksville, application of Progress Properties, LLC, for zone change on property located at the intersection of Scott Drive and Birch Road from R1 Single Family Residential District, C5 Highway and Arterial Commercial District to R2A Single Family Residential District. Ordinance 55, 2022-23, second reading, an ordinance amending the city zoning ordinance of the city of Clarksville, Tennessee as it pertains to lot coverage and cluster subdivision regulations. Adoption of the minutes from January 4th and February 2nd.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Anyone wish to be recognized on the consent agenda? Seeing none, we're now ready for the I'm sorry, Councilperson Reynolds, you're recognized on the consent agenda.
Yes, I'd like to ask Mr. Baker a question about the home rule.
Mr. Baker, you are recognized.
We're seeing the state legislature come in and take over issues within Nashville. We can talk about the politics behind it, but changing the numbers on their council, taking over the airport. If we go to home rule, does that protect us from the ability of the state legislature to come in and direct us like that? Because we no longer have to have their approval?
The answer to that basically is yes and no. It's yes because you are given the authority to govern your own self with regard to the charter. The answer is no, though, in the ultimate sense, because the state legislature can always change everything about state law at any time it wants. And in fact, the state legislature could absolutely do away with the city of Clarksville. It could just revoke our private act charter. It could change, if we have home rule, it could change the home rule law in such a way that we don't really do we're not able to do what everybody thinks we can do now under home rule. So ultimately, we are just a political subdivision creature created by the state, and they can do with us as they please.
But having home rule does give us we don't have to go to them for our own charter changes.
Correct.
I mean, right? I mean, okay.
Councilperson Butler, you're recognized.
Mr. Baker, that's it's general laws. We would still be, we're still accountable to general laws, correct?
Mr. Baker.
Like there are general laws that apply to every city. It doesn't matter what kind of a charter that they have, the ones that the state sets. So we're always accountable to that. And then home rule, I just wanted to point that out, and then there's the things that we can do on our own. The biggest one being change our own charter. But I mean, we're always accountable to them. I was just putting it in the words that I read in the research that I did for it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilperson Reynolds, back to you.
I would direct myself to Councilperson Butler. So my understanding of home rule, though, is right now our charter has to be approved at the state level, and they, in the past, have held up the approval based on different things, but we would no longer have to go to them for approval. It would go to the people of the community.
For charter changes.
For charter changes and for the initial.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Councilperson McLaughlin, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. Previous speaker generated some thoughts in my head, which can be scary. I apologize. So the sponsor of this, I apologize, I wasn't here when this came up before, but would there be additional costs to have this put on the ballot if it were to pass, and what would that be? And then the second part question is, if this does go into existence, we would only be able to update our charter potentially if we had a home rule every 2 years during the election cycle. Is that correct?
That's directed at the sponsor. You recognize.
Thank you, Mayor. Now, this was 6 months ago. I believe, and I would prefer to call her back and ask, but I believe that the election commission director told me that it can just be put on, and we agreed on that at the last meeting, I think, which one we were putting it on to get the maximum participation. I believe she told me that it just goes on there and it wouldn't incur additional cost, but I will have to go back and look at my emails. And if I find them, then I'll send them to the clerk so that she can send them to everybody. The 2-year thing, again, 6 months ago, I do believe that is correct. Okay. And then something just to add, if these are things that people are concerned with, we can also make our own stipulations. Like we can only amend every 2 years, we can only take 5 amendments to the charter. Do you know what I'm saying? Like we as a city could further restrict ourselves or the people. I get that sounds terrible, but we could do that once it's a home rule.
Thank you.
Is that everything?
At this time.
Everything and more. Okay. Councilperson Reynolds, you're recognized.
I just wanted to respond that I did go back and read to get ready, and it is every 2 years. And just to the previous speaker, we actually postponed it because we knew that the council was changing and we wanted to be inclusive of the new people before we made this decision. And that is also the reason that I believe that we amended it to the 2024 election, so there would not be a charge and that we would have maximum participation in the election. No, I see you shaking your head.
Let's don't have crosstalk.
Okay, so I could be wrong about that part of it, but I do know it is every 2 years. I do want to remind that we're only voting to put it to a vote to the people, right? Like this vote doesn't make it happen. This vote puts it on the ballot in 2024 as to whether or not the community wants to do it. We don't decide. It'll go to a vote, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Councilperson Zacharias, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. So it was an amendment that I sponsored that pushed this from 2022 to 2024. And my reasoning behind it was we were looking at this in, first reading in, I think, June of last year, second reading in July. And there just wasn't a whole lot of time between July and November to get out there and educate people on what they were actually voting for. In my experience talking to residents about this, if you want 10 different definitions of what a home rule charter is, just ask 10 different people in Clarksville. We need to make sure we get this right. Somebody I was talking to recently about this actually opined that this might be one of the biggest votes that this city undertakes. So we do need to make sure we get it right. Yes, we do give ourselves some freedom with the home rule charter. We also give up the ability to be the subject of special acts by the state were they to want to pass something for the city of Clarksville's benefit. They would not be able to do that. So there is a lot to be considered in this, and I just thought that the amount of time that we had between it being initially raised and the 2022 election was insufficient. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? We're now ready for the Finance Committee report. Chairperson Streetman, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. Ordinance 80, 2022, 23, first reading, an ordinance relative to water and sewer capacity reservation fees and authority to negotiate reservation fees and terms and to contract with consumers of large volumes of water and or producers of large volumes of sewer. Both the Finance and Gas and Water Committee voted in favor of approval. And Mayor, I would like to ask if we could bring the director, Mr. Mark Riggins, up here or the department head to be able to come up here and discuss it in detail.
That's probably a good idea. Mr. Riggins, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Good evening. First, I'd like to apologize to Council Lady McLaughlin. She had requested that I get together a spreadsheet to send to her before tonight, and I've not been able to complete that since Tuesday night. I will continue to do that, and I'll get that with you, and we can talk about that.
If you'll share that with the
I will.
clerk, she'll
I'll send
spread,
it to the
she'll
clerk.
spread the good word.
So just for clarification, it will be a sample, just an example of what that may look like, because as you'll find that this will be ever changing if you pass this.
Mr. Riggins, before you get into that,
Yes.
could I ask someone in the back to adjust the thermostat? We're killing hogs up here.
It feels great.
Does it? Mr. Riggins, you're recognized. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So those of you who were here 2 years ago will remember when we discussed the rate increase that I vowed that as long as I'm in this seat, that I would do everything in my power to make sure everybody pays their fair share toward utilities. And basically, this ordinance does that. This ordinance is to codify this verbiage. It actually accomplishes two things. So number one, it allows me and my department to set fees for both water and wastewater or sewer system capacity reservation. And what that does, we set a per gallon per day fee amount, and that amount is calculated through 3 to 4 things. It's based on a contracted bid amounts for, say, like the water plant. We know we bid that project out. It's roughly $200 million. And then also engineers' estimates for future capital improvement projects that benefit the entirety of Clarksville. Or cost of service studies like Raft-Tellis did the rate study. We would also possibly in the future, I assume that we will at some point, partner with them, do a RFP or RFQ for proposals for cost of service. What does it cost for a single family home to hook up, commercials, industries, things like that. But it allows us to capture all of those estimates and or real numbers and bring together a fee for capacity. And basically just to try to simplify it as much as I can, you take the water plant with $200 million for 12 million gallons. And let's say an industry wants to come in and they want $1.2 million, 10% of that plant. Well, just by the math, to get 10% of the capacity of that plant, then they need to pay $20 million. That way, anything other than that, then that puts it back on the ratepayers, single-family residents, small commercial businesses, paying, subsidizing those industries. And that's what we do not, I don't believe any of us want that to happen. This is an industry standard that's done other places. The reason I leave that flexible is because, again, we have the numbers on the water plant, but I may bid a project out tomorrow for another 10, 12, $14 million that would need to go into this factor as well. So again, that gives me and or my designees the capability, the availability to do that. The second piece, number 2 of this, also allows me to negotiate with these industries or small, or not small, or business consumers in terms of the fees or related reserve capacity, as well as enter into contracts concerning such. So the goal of these contracts is to give gas and water and our customers ultimate protection when it comes to the use of our utilities, or more so the payment for such. So back on the capacity fees, I want to be clear on this. If you'll look at number 1, you'll see a yearly average of 25,000 gallons per day or more, equal to that or more. This is not a single family residence. This is not a business on Strawberry Alley or on Riverside Drive. It is a large business that consumes a lot of water or produces a lot of sewer. And we do find that currently where we stand right now by the code, our single family residents or single family customers, when they pay connection fees, when developers or builders pay those, they are the ones who are probably paying more their fair share than anybody by code now. They pay a per square foot fee. It's 20 cents for water, 80 cents for sewer. All other industries, they pay a meter fee, and it's basically covering the cost of the meter and not much else. Now, as you know, infrastructure projects, things like that only affect them, they pay for those themselves up front, just like you hear on the zoning cases. When upgrades are required, the developer must pay those. But this is really set for projects that we control, we bid out in their capacity that they're reserving. again, they are used to this. The industries are. You can imagine if, say, if a company comes in and they want 1 million gallons a day, they want to be sure that they have the capability of receiving that 1 million gallons a day every day. So the only way to do that, ensure that, they need to pay me for that capacity so I don't sell that to someone else. And again, in these contracts, what that would allow us to do is to negotiate what that fee may be. And what that would be based on is solely, it's just monetary, based off the profit. As some of you have heard me discuss before, once you reach a certain threshold or point of water usage, it does get cheaper for me to serve you the more water you use. That pipe's already there. There's only so much maintenance that's going to happen to that pipe, whether you use a gallon or this many gallons. Beyond that, it does get cheaper. So based on that and that profit, every one of these, and we have a current contract that we're in review right now for an industry coming to town. And in that, what that allows us to do is look at that profit margin that we have and be able to reduce this fee. And if I show that I can make up that difference with the profit I'm making off of them, it's more attractive to them and maybe get them here for ones who are substantial. It'll be great for the city, let me say that. And that is what we're in right now in negotiations with this company now on. I can tell you, based off that contract currently, the water, yes, based off that proposed contract, the water reservation fee would be $15.3 million and the sewer reservation fee would be $6.7 million. So you can see we're talking about a lot of water, a lot of sewer, a lot of money. Also in that, when I say about gives us the ultimate protection for the city and its residents and our customers, what that does is basically in this contract that we have now, we're proposing, you've got an estimated amount. And in that contract, we've written back clawback provisions to where at ultimate build out, if they say they'll build out sometime in 2025, then that means in the year of 2026, when they're at ultimate build out and in full production, we will look at their usage. And if they are below 90% of that first proposed usage, any negotiations we've had before to reduce that capacity fee amount, I claw that back and go back to that original amount, which currently with this contract's $10.25 in lieu of $8.20. So what we would do is we would look at that, look at their actual usage, use that 1025 instead of the 820, and then whatever we would just do the math, subtract that, and the remainder of their payments would be based off that new number to true up that. What that would also do, let's say they use 75% of that. So instead of 1 million gallons a day, they use 750,000. That would also free me up to sell that 250,000 gallons of water to someone else, market that, sell that to someone else, get another contract, get that money in hand. We also have an overage in these contracts. And my plan is to make this contract that we're doing now, it's the first that we've done of this nature. It would basically be the template from now on for this. There's an overage on that as well, that once they reach 110% of whatever that average is, whether that's the average from day one that they got within 90% or more, or that newly averaged, that new contract amount, once it ever reaches 110% of either one of those amounts, it brings us back to the table. There's not a lot of definitions except for that. It forces us to come back to negotiate, and that's good for us and it's good for them. For one, if they're using that much more water, they're going to want to reserve that amount. Because if not, if we get an instance where I have to curtail water usage, I'm going to shut them off, or I'm going to limit their usage on that water. They're going to want to reserve that amount, which means they're going to have to pay me to do so. If not, I'm going to sell that water to someone else. So again, it keeps us in a place where we know exactly how much water we have to market to other people. And it puts us in a position where we can have these industries and large businesses pay for what they're actually using. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Councilperson Smith, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Riggins, for that good information that you have provided us on this new ideology about increasing and making this money.
Yes, ma'am.
And you said something about a 15.3 million capacity fee. to be for one firm. You were just giving us an example. So, after we, we make all this money, well, how would it be utilized in the department? What are we gonna do with this money?
I'm
And
gonna
I know
pay,
we need the money, but
right.
no, what,
You may want to clarify, it's not a check they write day one. It's amortized over a period of time.
This one, yes, sir. So this contract that we're doing here, and it leaves the flexibility with us. So most of the time on much smaller projects than the one I'm talking about, it will be a check cut up front.
oh, it will?
Yes. In this one here, because it's so great and it's tied very much so to the water plant, I know that debt I have on that water plant is 20 years plus.
Right.
So what we've done to make that more attractive to them, my goal is to reach $15.3 million and to make sure that's paid for what they're using. But I'm fine. What we're doing in that is amortizing that over 20 years. We divide that by 20 or by 20 and then again by 12, they'll make monthly payments on that until they reach that mark and pay it off. The sewer is actually delayed for 5 years and then done because that's going toward our new sewer plant, which we plan to start design sometime between, it's a ballpark now, sometime between 2027 and 2030, we'll go into design for a new sewer plant. And there may be projects that come on after that. But what that would do is that would help me make those payments on that bond issuance. That's exactly right. This is all tied to either existing projects or future projects, and it will go to pay off that. As we talked about the other day, I'm a non-for-profit, so I'm nonprofit, not for profit. So I can't take this money and just hoard it up and hold on to it. I keep enough cash on hand for bond covenants, to get good ratings, good interest rates, things like that. But my money going in, it's going back out to projects to improve infrastructure at all times.
Okay, that's good. And so they will make a big down payment and then they will make payments. Is that correct?
No, ma'am. On this one, on this contract I'm mentioning, it will be monthly payments.
Right,
So
monthly payments.
once they finish construction, which is probably roughly 2025, something like that, 2026, then once the first bill that goes out of the contractor's name, because the way development works, during the building phase, the contractor pays the water bill because it's for building purposes. Once they're completed and there's a CO, a certificate of occupancy, and they turn that over to the factory and they change the water bill into their name, that very first water bill they get is when that billing starts. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And it'll go for 20 years after that.
Thank you. Sounds great.
You're very
Give me
welcome.
some money.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Riggins.
Thank you, sir.
Chairperson Streetman, you're recognized.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Riggins. Ordinance 81, 20, 22, 23, first reading. An ordinance amending the operating budgets for fiscal year 2023 for governmental funds. Ordinance 146, 20, 21, 22 to add additional funding to the Capital Projects Fund. The Finance Committee recommended approval. Would like to just point out, as we're all aware of, costs are continuing to rise, and that's especially true in regards to construction. That's why you'll see that there is an increase needed to further the work on the three projects included being the Exit 8 Athletic Complex and Access, the new parking garage, and Spring Creek Parkway.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none, Chairperson Streetman.
That concludes my report, Mayor.
Okay, now ready for Gas and Water Committee. Chairperson Holman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll have a full report next week.
Thank you. Neighborhood and Community Services, Chairperson Shekinah, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. Resolution 49, 2023, 2022-23, a resolution authorizing a request from Neighborhood and Community Services to amend its 2020 through 2024 consolidated plan for the expenditures of $1,211,048. Council members, as you can see in your package, there's an outline there of what that entails. What we're really looking at is three different items. It's not an increase in funding. It's a realignment of funding. When this plan was done in 2020, there was a cost projected against these grants for certain items. And now some of that money was not spent for those particular grants. So we want to repurpose that to three things: the L&N train station, the Urban Ministry Safe House, and then Kiana's house. And again, that's outlined in your package there. And if you have any questions, I'll be prepared to answer those questions with the assistance of Community and Neighborhood Services.
Any questions about this resolution? Seeing none, Chairperson Shakina, be recognized.
Also, Mayor, I'd like to invite the council members to a special session on 13 March for Community and Neighborhood Services to discuss housing. That was brought up through the Community and Neighborhood Services. So we will meet at 4:30 p.m. on the fourth floor of the conference, in the conference room on the 13th of March to again discuss housing.
We'll get some information out. Thank you, sir.
All right, and that concludes my report.
Thank you. We're now ready for the Parks and Recreation Committee. Chairperson Zacharias, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. I will have a full report next week. Oh, thank you.
Would you like to report on that photograph?
That was an imposter. Chief, if we could get on that, identity theft or something going on? No help, huh?
It was too easy, sir. Too easy.
Everybody's having fun.
You want to explain yourself?
So this is not pictured our Councilperson Holloman, Councilperson Streetman, I believe Councilperson Little and Councilperson Reynolds were there also, jumping into a very cold pool over at Swan Lake to promote the raising of funds for swim lessons for underprivileged children this summer, put on by Parks and Recreation. So we're proud of that mission. That water was cold.
It is February. All right, thank you. Anything else for the committee?
No, I will have a full report next week.
Okay, thank you. Public Safety Committee, that will be Councilperson Red, and I will just channel him and say a full report next week. Transportation Streets Garage Committee, Chairperson Smith, you're recognized.
I have a report on March the 2nd.
Thank you. We're now ready for new business, Resolution 46, 2022-23. Postponed from last meeting, a resolution requesting the Parking Commission reconsider their decision, reinstate the issuance of free parking passes to the elected city council persons in the city of Clarksville, Tennessee, and to the elected commissioners of Montgomery County, Tennessee. Councilperson Reynolds, you're the sponsor. You're recognized.
Thank you. The Parking Commission met this month, and the resolution was actually amended to ask them to reconsider their original motion and clarify their intent. They did change the wording and have included city council members can send their license plate numbers to the parking manager, and we can park in city parking, which was withdrawn initially. And county commissioners can do the same and park in the garage. So it's been resolved. That was actually the resolution, was to have them reconsider. I do have two questions for Mr. Baker. In respect to Councilperson Red, he asked the question that it is a change and a decrease in our allowance from when we were elected. I will tell you, as a sponsor of the resolution, I am satisfied with what we have now, but I do want to honor his question.
So I've given this some thought, and I've spoken with Miss Matta, and let me start with saying this. While I'm a confident man and an attorney, I also am humble enough to state I am not a tax lawyer and I can't give legal tax advice. And so how the IRS, that ominous, and the IRS code, that ominous creature, is not something I care to deal with. And I just can't speak to how they might rule on whether this is truly compensation from a tax aspect. From a charter aspect, in discussing this with Mr. Palmore and Ms. Matta, it's my belief and my legal opinion that under both the old way of doing business, if you will, and under what I understand what the new proposal is, there is actually no change even if it is deemed to be compensation. Because the bottom line is you're getting what we'll call free parking during business hours related to your office, committee meetings, city council meetings, executive regular sessions, special call meetings, as well as when you're just coming downtown to get your mail at City Hall or to meet with department heads. And so since, in my view, since there is no actual change, then there's no violation of the charter. The only thing that's changed is the process of how you go about exercising the parking privilege, if you will.
And yes, so on next week, how do I, like, they clarified it, how do I dispose of this resolution? Do I just ask them not to second it, or what is the correct way next week to dispose of this?
Either, it has, because of it was on the agenda, somebody has to make a motion, get it on the floor. And then if you want it to die, you would ask that nobody second it, and then it would die for lack of a second. If someone blurts out a second, or maybe someone wants to have it seconded, then the only way to kill it, if you will, is to have it voted down.
Okay, and I was just concerned because we did make a motion and we did postpone it. I wasn't sure if that still was applicable next to do that.
And you can't, I think maybe this is what you're getting at, you can't just withdraw it because it has already come before the council and it was postponed, and plus it's already on the executive session agenda because it was supposed to be. And so the only way to dispose of some agenda item that is in that situation or that posture is through parliamentary action.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councilperson Butler, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. If someone accidentally specifically, because if they want to second it, cool. But if they accidentally second it, couldn't we just postpone it indefinitely too?
You could just vote it down.
It's preferable, in my view, if the majority wants to kill it, is to just vote it down. But that is a possible parliamentary maneuver that would effectively kill it. But it wouldn't be a permanent end to it because there is some other parliamentary moves that can be made to bring something back that has been postponed even indefinitely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're now ready for mayor and council member comments. Any member wish to make a comment? Councilperson McLaughlin, you're recognized.
Thank you. I don't know if it's possible or not, but in the future, would you consider having the zoning case number added to the agenda with the ordinance number? We get emails from the public on zone case by the number, and sometimes it's difficult for me to cross-reference that. And then also, Councilman Red was absent tonight, but I made cupcakes for his birthday. I took a picture. I'll text the picture to him, but please have a cupcake on your way by because they're not going to last until next Thursday, and that concludes my report.
All righty, you heard it here first. Councilperson Zacharias, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a microphone in front of me, so I'm going to use it to wish my mother a very happy birthday today. It is her 32nd birthday, she says.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Mom. Thank you, Mayor.
So that makes you what, 13?
Sure.
Yeah, something, okay, all right.
Old enough to
Councilperson,
wear a flamingo.
okay, Councilperson Reynolds, you're recognized for comments.
Yeah, I would just like to remind people in Ward 9 or other people that are interested, I have my town hall scheduled, my first live one, on Saturday at 3 p.m. at the Fallen Brewery. Please come if you would like. Thanks.
Councilperson Allen, you're recognized for comments.
So since I got a mic in front of me, within the next 2 weeks, I will be a grandmother.
Hey,
And so if you get a call next Thursday that says, I'm not going to make it, we're in labor, I won't be here.
okay.
I'm just letting y'all know.
We'll pray for safe and quick delivery.
Yes.
Councilperson Smith, you're recognized.
Motion to adjourn.
Well, we're not officially in session. Nice try, though. You have a microphone in front of you, though. Okay, all right. Nobody else for comments? We're now ready for the public comment portion of our agenda. Any member of the public wish to address the council? Seeing none, we'll see y'all next week. Thank you.